Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Boozer here. Hope everyone's having a great weekend so far. And thanks for joining us on this video. Today's video, we're actually going to be talking about the top DPS and top support champions for Live Arena based on statistics gathered from the Hell Hades website. So let's get right into it. Alright, so the idea for this video basically came from a Reddit post by Holy Pea Shooter. Thank you so much for compiling this data. The data is taken from the Hell Hades website, which collects data from Live Arena. So things like pick percentage, ban percentage, and win rate are gathered by Hell Hades. So definitely check out the website if you want to check out different champions. But this data, Holy Pea Shooter has compiled for Gold 2 Live Arena, so definitely near the top end of Live Arena. And it basically gives some interesting analysis or possibilities for discussion. So we're going to go over that in this video here. So I've compiled this data set, make it a little bit more user friendly. You get a nice visual here. And I did some scratch work on for my own account. So basically on the left hand side with the X's are champions that I don't have on my main account. And I highlighted some talking points for some champions. So in this order, the data set that Holy Pea Shooter compiled, it is ordered by pick percentage. So we can see here, pick percentage is actually per player. So for example, Sifi here is the most picked champion in Gold 2, 46.9%, which is per person. So in total, you're looking at about 94% of total matches will have Sifi in them. So you just multiply these numbers by 2 and then you'll know how many total matches will have the champion in it. Second place is Duchess, and then you have Taras, Harima, Rhodos. On this column here, we show the support and DPS for support and DPS ranking in terms of pick percentage. So the interesting to take away is Sifi is the most picked champion. She also has an insanely high pick rate and a very high ban rate as well. So it's pretty consensus that she is one of the best champions available in Live Arena. Especially with the A1 being so powerful as well. Duchess comes in as the second highest picked champion, but her win rate is actually substantially lower than Sifi's win rate, which is actually kind of interesting. So even though she's picked so highly, her win rate is not super high. There was a comment in the Reddit thread basically saying that if you don't get to pick first, you don't get to pick Sifi. You are forced to pick Duchess to basically block Sifi Duchess Taras combo, which is interesting take and definitely very possible at the higher end of Live Arena. So the first DPS we have showing up on this list is the Taras, which is picked about 75% of total matches and has an insanely high win rate, especially for a DPS champion. We did a video on this maybe a couple months ago when Live Arena first started, and Taras was still the highest rated DPS. It is still the highest rated DPS. So no real surprise here. Picked a lot, banned a lot, and wins a lot. The next highest DPS pick is actually Harima, 35% per player, so 70% of matches will have a Harima, 51% win rate. The importance of these columns is basically how they stack up relative to each other. So you have a comparison, direct comparison with everybody in the same column. That's you can make sense of the stats that way. So for example, like Taras is 55, Harima is 51, so Taras is a lot better than Harima. Then we have Rhodos actually. So obviously void legendaries versus non-void legendaries. You're going to see more non-void legendaries, but you're going to see Rhodos and Harima definitely picked a lot here. Rhodos, even though he gets countered quite a bit, he still gets picked a lot, probably because he's mostly like an older champion, so a lot of people will have Rhodos, maybe heavily empowered as well, so multiple copies of Rhodos, which makes sense. His win rate is not very good. Not terrible, but not very good. Mainly because Rotos has a lot of counters against him, and you'll actually notice there's a lot of counters even in the top 30 here. So there are quite a bit of problems for Rotos. I have Rotos listed in the A tier, and these are the comparables based on the data set that I have from that Reddit post. So these both of these diagrams are based off of this data set. We can go over how make more sense of it in a second here. So moving down from Rotos, we have another support, Necrit. Obviously, we know how good Necrit is. 28% pick rate per person and a 49% win rate. It's actually quite good for a champion that kind of is mostly like there to support your champions. He does bring an ally attack, which is really good. Pairs really nicely with some of these champions as well. So yeah, Necrit definitely worth the slot here. One of the best support champions overall. Then we have the next two supports are the lockout supports. It's interesting to see the lockout supports. You can see here Yumiko and Warlord, they actually have quite different win rates, to the point where Yumiko is kind of in another level compared to Warlord. So I have Yumiko in the SS, basically the best of the best supports based on win rate data here. I find that a little bit surprising, mainly because Warlord has the TM reduction. He has heal as well as block debuffs. But I think the biggest problem against Warlord is that he gets feared by Taras, which is highly picked, obviously. But he is highly banned as well. You can see both lockouts, they get banned quite a bit. Mainly because if you don't have a way to deal with them, you're kind of screwed. So yeah. But yeah, moving on, we have another support. So this is Marichka. Marichka actually has the highest win rate based on this data set. Marichka is gonna pair really good with a lot of these DPS champions because of her A1. So we kind of see a trend here with like Necrit and like Marichka. They're gonna perform quite well with their ally attacks, and obviously Marichka Taras is insanely powerful. But we see Marichka actually not picked quite as high as Taras, mainly because Marichka is probably not as good on her own by herself. So if you guys ever fight Marichka in live arena, if she's there without another reviver, it's actually not too bad. But of course her A1 ally attack is incredibly annoying and really strong, obviously, with some of these DPS champions. Moving on, we have UDK, picked quite a bit, free champion. He's probably going to be empowered. He's banned quite a bit, mainly because he does mess up Siphi, he does mess up Rotos, and both Siphi and Rotos are very highly picked. Usually in live arena, the strategy is like you pick Rotos with UDK together on the same team, so that you don't have to face UDK yourself. His win rate is actually not bad. I put him in the middle tier based on the win rate data, so he's with a bunch of other good support champions. There are ways to beat him up. He doesn't really bring too much other than giving your team some lasting power. I've seen some some UDKs hit pretty hard, so I don't know if people are building them with damage or more damage nowadays. But I think it's still 6-piece stone skin, slow. I can't see another build, so maybe bolster if people are trying to go bombs against you. Like you can go bolster, maybe 1 in 20 UDKs might be bolster. I don't know. But yeah, moving on, we have another DPS, Georgia. Georgia is actually a very strong champion. Obviously, cuts through stone skin and all those protection buffs. He has a very good win rate actually. So he's actually a slightly higher win rate than Harma. He's void affinity, which is also very good. And yeah, he just does a lot of damage. If he goes first, or if he's paired with Necrit, he's gonna be a nightmare to try to deal with. He also pairs very good with ally attack, so he actually works really well with Necrit overall. And he'll perform really good. His A1's really strong, so if he gets locked out, he still performs very good. So Georgit, definitely a very strong champion. Moving on, we have Hellcath. Hellcath's one of those like past fusion. He was getting a lot of love in when Live Arena first started, and it seems like even in Gold 2, he still gets played quite a bit. A high pick rate, relatively high pick rate, and actually a respectable win rate relative to the other DPS champions. Like it's similar to Rotos, which is interesting because Rotos is just like one champion. He doesn't need any support. At Hellcath, you could make an argument that he needs some support to take care of him a little bit. But in this data set, he is a DPS, and he performs quite decent. I have him in the in the A tier with Leoris and Rotos. So, and we definitely see him get picked quite a bit. His ban rate is actually decently high as well, 19%. Same as UDK, same as Duchess. So, Hellcath, very good. And of course, free to play friendly, being a old fusion. Moving on, we have Uko, which is obviously another fusion. Super good champion. Had a little bit of a small nerf to his A2 when Plarium removed the double hit chance to stun. His A2 used a double hit chance to stun or double hit chance to provoke, but now it's just a single chance. I mean, he's still an excellent champion. His win rate is respectable. He's not banned too often, and he is picked fairly frequently. Force Affinity, he's a strip while bringing revive, and obviously the stuns, if it's in a stun set, makes him very, very valuable. Very good champion. He's in the A tier with a lot of the other good support champions as well, based on the data set here. So here we have an interesting talking point, Ragash. So Ragash, I have him in the SS tier. Basically, depending on his deployment, he will perform extremely well. You won't pick him all the time. Because he's not going to perform as well as like in a generalist role. But if you pick him versus some of the force defense champions, he will perform extremely well. His A1 hits very hard, so even if he gets locked out, he will still continue to perform well. And since Harma is picked so often, he will counter Harma very well. He's probably one of the best counters to Harma. Just because he's positive affinity, he hits super hard. He has AoE, so he can CC her as well, and he can cloak some of your champions as well. So it's very hard for her to target. Ragash is just a great champion here, and definitely gonna get some extra love in the live arena if you guys have Ragash. Cardio, just straight up good support champion. Brings the ally attack, which is very good with a lot of these DPS champions, as I mentioned earlier. Leoris, actually very respectable win rate for a DPS champion. He's very like generalist, but a very respectable win rate for a generalist champion with no synergies. So obviously some of these win rates will have certain it's going to go up and down based on the team that they're with. So when you're comparing win rates, it's good to compare champions of similar uses and like I guess similar partners, I guess, or supports that are needed to work together. So for example, if you're going to compare like a generalist DPS like Leoris versus a generalist DPS like Georgid, like that is fairly comparable. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So Arbiter is coming up next as the next support. Arbiter and Kymar kind of fill the speed role. They usually pair pretty well with Siphi. Not super insane win rates, but very decent. Does get banned quite a bit actually, Arbiter. And then brings attack up, so it strengthens your champions a little bit. Rhonda also shows up here, very respectable win rate. Even as a generalist, I think it's actually quite decent, but I think she's mostly picked as a counter pick. So Rhonda right here with Stultus and Baron based on the data set here. But Rhonda I think is a counter pick, so her win rate is slightly inflated because her deployment will be in stronger matchups for herself, which means her win rate probably is not super high, considering Ragash has a preferred win rate of 58%, which is much higher. So Ronda is probably not a super great counter when deployed, but still respectable when deployed against those specific teams like Roto's teams, for example. Kymar. So Kymar and Ramantu have very similar win rates, very similar roles. Kymar I think is better because he brings the speed aura, as well as some CC, whereas Ramantu doesn't. But they have similar win rates. Kymar is better here. So just something to consider when you guys are going. If you guys don't have Kymar, then Ramantu is the free to play option, obviously. And we have another interesting talking point here. Pythion versus Mithrala. We have two cleansers here. Mithrala is significantly better than Pythion, which is actually very interesting how badly Pythion is performing here. So I really don't know how to explain why he's doing so badly, because both of these champions are basically picked for deployment to cleanse debuffers. Not sure why Pythion's so bad here. Maybe he needs more support to make his passive better. Maybe his A1 heal is not relevant. I know Mithril can bring Hex, which is kind of annoying, so unless you have a cleanse or block debuff, then Mithril can be super annoying. We can also bring Cardio into the mix, into the conversation here. So Cardio is 45%. He also brings cleanse and extra damage, but it seems like Mithrala's cleanse and Hex is probably is better. So it's interesting to talk about, but it's a little bit surprising, and Pythion is not performing very well, so yeah, maybe something to look out for. Moving on, Elva is also interesting to talk about. Elva is like basically like a mini Duchess type kit. She has the plus a cleanse, so it's kind of a little bit different, but she's kind of like Duchess, where she has this single revive, she has this speed up, block debuffs, but she does bring a cleanse, and her win rate is quite high, but her sample rate is pretty low. So we could take it with a grain of salt. I'm not sure what her deployment would be. She'd probably be used as a cleanser first of all. So based on this list here, she's one of the best cleansers in the whole list. So maybe keep that in mind. Elva was a 20 sacred guarantee back in the day. So yeah, maybe something to dust off. I'm not sure what kind of builds. So builds are definitely going to be very important. Tormund, also very good. He belongs in the S tier when deployed properly. He's going to be one of those late stage picks where you pick him when there's no block debuffs or no cleansers available. It's going to be very unlikely. That's why his overall pick rate is very low, because it's very unlikely that the other team will not have a cleanser or a block debuff. Just look at these top support champions. The top support champions all bring either block debuffs or some kind of cleansing ability. But when deployed properly, Tormund is a very, very good DPS champion. Moving on, next surprise here, we got Candrafon, 31.94% win rate, puts him as the worst of the top 15 DPS champions. It's interesting. I can't really say how he performs so badly. Maybe against Duchess, he's not able to cut her down. Against Haruma, since Haruma's picked all the time, Candrafon probably doesn't have a chance to get into much teams, but it's obvious here he doesn't get picked a lot, and when he does not perform well. So it's a little bit interesting. I'm not too sure. I know he's not going to perform well against like Teros, Haruma, so these are the top pick DPS champions. He's not going to perform well against Duchess. He was recently fixed to go through UDK, so that's a good one. He can work well against lockouts, so it's interesting why his win rate is so low. I think this might just be an outlier, because I think Candrafon actually performs pretty decent. So this might just be like small sample size or just an outlier. So I would keep an eye on this, but I don't think Candrafon deserves to be at the bottom spot here. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. But yeah, so Stultus, Baron, they basically have similar win rates, similar pick rates. Baron gets banned more. Kind of interesting. I never had really have trouble with Baron, to be honest. But they're very serviceable nukers. Turvul, not surprised. Turvul, without the proper support, he's not going to perform very well. Otherwise, he's a huge menace if he does get proper support, mainly just Necrit. Mortu, it's interesting. You probably take him in against lockouts. But yeah, he's got a decent win rate, doesn't get picked too often. Valkyrie, same thing, doesn't get picked too often, doesn't have an insane win rate, but they all belong in the same category here as lower grade nukers. So anyways, I think is some interesting takeaways here. Basically, like Arbiter gets picked a lot, she's still in the meta, and then we have some debuffers sneaking in here. So they are coming back and getting used a little bit more. Definitely Kymar, Ramontu. Ukko was always being used quite a bit. The other interesting part was that Pythion was performing so badly. Could just be an outlier, but kind of interesting. He doesn't really bring too much. If he was by himself, he doesn't bring enough. But I find that hard to believe. Like, a lot of these champions will bring buffs, so his passive will be better. He brings heals. He's force. He brings a revive. So, it's hard to say. As for DPS, not too surprising. Not too many surprises here. Kandrafon was a bit of a surprise. I was kind of surprised at how well Ragosh was doing. Like, he's doing insanely well. But it makes sense since Harma gets picked all the time. And if Ragosh is picked against Harma, then he probably performs pretty good. Other champions, Georgia performing quite well actually as well. It's also kind of surprising since he requires some support, but it's interesting. Anyways, let me know in the comments below what you guys think. I found the dataset always interesting to talk about, and obviously live arenas, not everybody's cup of tea, but this is kind of a fun conversation to have once in a while, and it's nice to theory craft and think about some of the reasons why, and try to dissect what people's choices and how things are performing in the live arena. I know it's going to be a small segment, gold 2 and above, but this is the best of the best, and yeah, it's interesting to talk about. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.